Nat Cassidy, what is going on?
Hello, everybody. Recording in progress.
Recording in
Hello.
progress.
Surprise.
You can say whatever you want, though. You can say, Brendan, fuck you, and I'll cut it out if you want.
Wow.
So
rude. So
Got
rude.
your back, bitch.
I can feel the tension. It's great.
There's no tension. We all love each other.
Brendan's my big bro. If there's anything you now or at any point don't want to talk about, you don't have to explain the damn thing. Just let us know.
I'll just go like this.
Do that, man. Be very aggressive about it. I will cut.
Bail, abort. No.
Oh,
I'll be honest with you. I just like an hour or two ago shaved my facial hair for the first time in like 10 years.
I was gonna say, definitely
So-
looks different.
Yeah, I might just like stop responding and start staring at myself because it is very alarming.
I get
so-
that.
Very dapper, though.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah,
It's
dapper. It's a good
it's
word.
something. My I don't normally go without at least something here because this is not a what the scientists would call a load-bearing chin.
Yeah,
But
never heard a
shadows are
chin
working.
described like that.
I feel very top-heavy on my head right now. This is where all the hair is now.
I
It's like
get
Willy
it.
Willy was turned upside down.
And are you good? Do you want to get
I'm
started?
good. I'm good. We've got gold already.
Yeah. Welcome
Willy
to
Willy
another
reference.
episode. Oh God, damn it, Brennan!
Abort! Cut this up. Dump it.
Welcome to another episode of Dead Headspace. I am your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my friend Brennan LaFaro. Say hello, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And our other friend, Candace Nola. Say hello, Candace.
Hello.
And we're talking to Nat Cassidy. Hello, Nat.
Hello, everybody. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
And for those that can't see and are just listening, Nat looks kind of like the reverse evil twin brother. He has no facial hair. It's
I'm the
very
good twin.
different. Yeah, the good twin.
It's weird. It's
He-
I don't know how long I'll do this. I had to
So-
do it for a gig.
Let's just ask you the question that we would love to know is what got you into horror?
Oh man. Well, I've been obsessed with horror basically as long as I've been a conscious entity, as far as I remember. Like it was just always a thing to get me to pay attention. I was to put it delicately, I was a real piece of shit kid. Like I was just like bouncing off the walls and always talking back to my teachers and literally like setting fires in the back of the classroom and whatnot. But they all kind of knew that a way to get me to pay attention was to talk about death or monsters or something like that. A story I often tell is like in my first grade, I had a teacher named Mrs. Shapiro. We fucking hated each other. We were just like, we were mortal enemies. She was the first of several teachers who did not allow me to have a desk. And for good reason, because I would do horrible things with my desk. But I had to sit at her desk, and that was my desk too. That was my writing surface. And she even implemented this like red and green construction card system with me that I would get like a red or a green card to take home to my mom every day to show if I was good or bad. And my mom would have to sign it until I learned how to forge her signature. But so we absolutely detested each other. But then one day she was Greek from Greece, and she was showing slides from a recent trip to Greece that she had just taken, and she was showing in the slideshow it was an amphitheater that she saw a production of Macbeth at, and she started telling, I don't know why she started telling this group of first graders the plot of Macbeth, but to her credit she noticed that I actually like started paying attention as soon as she started talking about regicide and witches and murder and whatnot. And so she basically challenged me to read Macbeth for the rest of the year as a first grader. And because I hated her, I was like, well, of course I'm going to do that, you monster. And I did. Like it was not easy. It wasn't fast, but like I committed myself to reading Macbeth. And I would read it with my mom, and she would help me with the words I didn't understand and stuff like that. But that started my lifelong obsession with Shakespeare also. And I like very quickly thereafter, I was already kind of a precocious child actor anyway, but I very quickly thereafter just like went whole hog into trying to do Shakespeare for, at that point, for the rest of my life. Eventually I moved to New York and fell out of love with Shakespeare. But the reason I bring that up is because even at that age, like if you told me that something was bloody and full of ghosts and witches and whatnot, like I was in. So I don't to maybe hazard an even shorter answer. I don't know. I don't. Some of it is nature, some of it is nurture. My mom was also a huge horror fan, so it was Stephen King all over the shelves and Anne Rice and Clive Barker. This was the 80s. It was the thing to read. So I was just kind of I grew up with it around all the time. So some of it I think is just in my blood, and some of it is just like from a very early age. That's just what I looked at as like what adult literature was, because that's what my mom was reading. Yeah, and I don't know, some of it's mostly just because it's the best genre. I don't even need to. It's just the best fucking genre. That's why I'm into it.
Yeah, there you go. So you're from Arizona originally. What was? I don't know. I've never been to that part of the world. I don't know much besides I know the Sisters of Slaughter are in that area, so shout out to them. But in all seriousness, man, what was it like growing up as someone that was like clearly driven to do artistic things? Because when I was growing up, um, it was early aughts in middle school. I remember I talked to one of my God, what do they call it? Not the principal, the guidance counselor, and he asked what I wanted to do, and I said growing up I always wanted to be like George Lucas or George Romero, Kevin Smith, and so that's what I want to do. I want to be a filmmaker. And he said, all right, you got to go to New York or LA. And even at that age, not the right answer, but I was like, I want to stay in New England, I'm not anymore, so it doesn't make sense. But I'm wondering if you kind of had people growing up for the most part that just didn't see. Well, actually, I'm assuming, did you know growing up that you definitely want to be in film or television?
Yeah, well, actually, I wanted to do primarily theater. Theater was like my biggest passion. But then I started to want to sort of like parlay that into film. Like when I was growing up, I was obsessed with Kenneth Branagh because his Henry V had come out when I was like 8. And so I saw that. I was already a massive Shakespeare like geek at that point. And like that kind of made me first start thinking about film as an artistic endeavor. And then so I watched Much Ado and Hamlet and all those Kenneth Branagh films at the time, and all like the Merchant Ivory films and stuff like that. But for the most part, I was very much a kid out of time and out of location. Like I really wish I had been born in like the 30s in London, so I could be like Olivier, or I could be like Gielgud or Burton, or those guys. I really wanted to have a sort of classical theater based career that then spun off into movies. And as you can imagine, that it was very much not a realistic path. It was a very anachronistic path to want to take. So I would often get asked by people if I wanted to move to like LA or something like that. And I was always like, no, why would I want to do that? I want to move to New York. I want to pursue theater. And then I want that theater career to translate into some sort of film or TV career. But growing up in Arizona, it was, it especially when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, like Phoenix was a desert in all definitions of the word. Like it was a literal desert. It's really fucking hot. And there's just cactus and mountains and dirt and scorpions, and that's just kind of it. But it was also, there just wasn't a lot to Phoenix at the time. It was, it's a big city. Like it's easy to forget. Now it's like the 6th largest city in the country or something like that. And when I was growing up, it was probably like, I don't know, the 12th, maybe the 10th, but it's so spread out. It's such a massive footprint, and everything is just highways and concrete or literal desert, especially when I was growing up. So there just really weren't a lot of like opportunities to make much of a career as an artist. I did a lot of like theater and local theater, regional theater, and stuff like that growing up. But similarly to what you just described. Like, it was always impressed upon me that you would need to move to one of the coastal big cities to have any sort of anything, if you really wanted to, if you had ambition or something like that.
Yeah, I just remember growing up that really I didn't know any people that really liked horror. I didn't really know. Then again, I didn't really ask, but I was a kid and no one else really talked about it, and I didn't really know anyone else that wanted to pursue art, but I always
Yeah.
had, and it just. I'll tell you what, I have no idea how it would have changed me or any of us if the internet existed how it is today back when we were growing up. It's interesting to think about, but um who is next? Brennan. Brennan, please take over, sir.
Sure. Let's talk horror influences.
Let's do it.
Nat, you had posted this really wonderful thing a couple months ago, and I remember seeing it and thinking, when he comes on, we got to talk about it. And you had talked about how growing up you considered Stephen King to write horror of the heart. You went on Clive Barker, horror of the body, Peter Straub, horror of the memory, Richard Matheson, the gut, Ramsey Campbell, perception, Shirley Jackson, the mind. And you rattled off a couple of others. And when you read a book like Mary and a book like Nestlings, there is a lot of genre influence. Like there's a lot of on the sleeve love for the history of the genre. So I'd kind of like to hear you just unpack that, but with a mind of how do you work that love and that history and still make it an original path, a book that comes out in 2023.
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah, I love horror with every fiber of my art consuming being. Like, it's just, as I've already said, like, it's all I usually ever want to read. It's all I want to watch or anything like that. I am of the opinion, and I've said this before, so forgive me if anyone has already heard me say this shit, but I am of the opinion that every good story is a horror story anyway. Because all horror ultimately means is that there are stakes and that the characters that you are hopefully connected to have something to lose, whether it is, their love or a job or their arm or their head or anything like that, or even just their understanding of the world and their place in it. So a horror story to me is just when that loss is promised and or threatened. And the thing I love about, capital H horror as a genre is that it's not afraid to give you a bad ending, a bum ending. It's not afraid to make that loss actually manifest. But that it's also not afraid to take its metaphors and just kind of blow them up. Like, if you're going to do a metaphor, why not fucking do it 110% and have a werewolf there or something like that? So all of which is to say, like, I have been always drawn to read horror, if we're speaking in the context of horror literature. And for those not watching this, I've got a bunch of bookshelves behind me that are like double or triple packed, mostly of what Grady Hendrix and Will Erickson would call paperbacks from hell. Like, I would just, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, really any money. I was raised by a single mom who could only work part-time because she had MS. So we had like basically no money. And my primary outlet for entertainment was either the library or a used bookstore. And I would spend most of my time at either one of these places. Because another thing about growing up in Arizona is you tend to just hang out in the places that have air conditioning. And the Blockbuster or the bookstore or the library would be places that you could actually cool down. And so I would just like wander up and down the shelves looking at these horror covers and kind of falling in love with the art and what the stories were what I would imagine the art was promising the stories would contain. And eventually I was able to read all of the ones that I was fascinated by, which is kind of where that list that you read, Brennan, came from. Just these really prolific authors of that era that I would spend most of my time with. I also I grew up far away from all of my friends. I grew up outside of my school district and had to get special permission to go to the school that I went to, which also meant that like I spent most of my time that I wasn't at school totally by myself because my mom was at work. My brother was older, and so he was usually like doing older kid stuff. And my friends were all just too fucking far away. And Arizona is not necessarily, or the part in Arizona that I grew up in, is not the sort of place where you like go walk to your friend's house. Like it's really hot. You could die. It's really ill-advised to do that. So especially like during the summer, I would just sit and read, and I would read these authors that I was fascinated by. I would read Ramsey Campbell and Anne Rice and Clive Barker and particularly Stephen King, who I became like more than obsessed with. And I would basically learn storytelling technique and what it even meant to tell a story through them. And through these, you know, sometimes bloated, sometimes cocaine fueled, very strange paperback novels from the 80s. So then to answer your question, like, how do you put that into a contemporary book? The love is just kind of, I feel like that's kind of unstoppable. That's basically my mother language. That'd be like saying how do you write in English? Like to me, that's just like how you write a book is you put all the shit that the books that you love gave you, and you just kind of put it back in there. You metabolize it, you digest it, and then you're just like, here's what it means to me. It's almost similar in a way to, we're going to bring it back to Shakespeare, because why not? It's like when you play a role that you're obsessed with. And usually what that also means is that you've seen other people play it, you've read scholarship about it, you have watched archival footage of other performances and stuff like that. And so you take all of that information and you put it through yourself as the filter. And what do I agree with? What choices did I agree with? What choices did I not agree with? What do I think would be more interesting to me as a potential audience member or as a performer to embody? And writing is very similar. Like all these questions that Stephen King or Peter Straub or Ramsey Campbell or whichever, John Ferris, whichever one you want to throw at the wall, what were they kind of wrestling with? Well, put it through my own personal sieve and my own filter, and like what does that mean to me? And ideally, as an artist, you're always kind of being responsive to your time also. So that's the ideal equation, is that you're taking your influences and you're adding them to who you are in the present. I feel like I'm doing a fucking TED talk right now, so forgive me. This all feels very didactic. But that's, I hope I'm kind of stabbing at answering your question. Like that's like when I was writing Nestlings, I really wanted that to be like a 70s potboiler, like Rosemary's Baby, like Salem's a Lot, but I wanted it to be about 2023. Or when I was writing Mary, I wanted it to be, sort of an homage to Carrie, but I realized I set myself up for failure doing Carrie and Rosemary's Baby as comps, because those are both like 60,000 word novellas. They wouldn't even be released as horror novels. They're so tight and structured, and I'm writing these much longer sort of 80s-ish beasts. But you take the things that you love about those stories and you try and figure out if there's something new that they can say. And just by virtue of, reading so many contemporary works and stuff like that, like those also get thrown into the mix. And ultimately everything that you write then should be, it should serve multi-purpose. It should be an entertaining story. It should be intelligent. It should withhold scrutiny, analytical scrutiny, but it should also in a way be you saying to a reader, here's what this means to me in this moment. Most of the time, I think it yields a pretty singular and hopefully interesting result. That was a lot of word salad. I hope someone was diagramming that sentence. Hope that made sense. It's been a long week, and it's only Monday.
Patrick is responsible for diagramming sentences.
It's going to come out in an ADHD funnel, so it will make sense to no one, including myself. But your response was perfect, man. I was just listening, and this isn't a lot of people listen to it in audio form. This is perfect replies. So keep it up. Candace, I feel like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was. All of that actually put me right where I wanted to start with
Hmm.
nestlings. So that whole answer, I think, just ties right into what I wanted to ask. So you took all of your influences from then, along with the experiences you've had now in
Hmm.
2020, 2021. And I read the book, I read the afterword, so I know there's quite a lot of you in this story. So I think maybe it's a twofold question here, if I can word this the right way. Was it hard for you to kind of space you from the story, but enough of your experiences went in it to give it the feel that you wanted
Hmm.
while being true to the story that you wanted to tell without giving too much of yourself in it, if that makes sense? Because I know we do take a lot of the things that we have went through and we add that into what we write because that's where the human experiences comes from, where the emotions come from. How hard was this for you to write without putting too much in it? And were there times that you had to maybe step away?
Hmm. That's a great question. I think on some level, I particularly enjoy the process of articulating what I'm going through or thinking about a certain thing or however you want to put it um, into whatever I'm working on. So in a way, there was never an impulse to pull back. There was never an impulse to like uh, stop putting what I was going through into in this specific case into nestlings. Like it was
Mhm.
almost the reverse. It was almost like how much of what I'm going through can I actually put into this so I can
Yeah.
kind of have that sort of cathartic feeling. I've always just kind of been a sieve when it comes to the things that I write. And it's
Yeah.
just like, if this is happening to me, then it's going into the book in one
Yeah.
way or another. And it in a weird way for those who have also read the afterword of nestlings, like they'll know this is kind of a weird thing to say, but in a weird way it was almost fortuitous that I was going through this incredibly horrible period while I was writing that book, because I then had that book to process all this stuff. Like it wound up being like the perfect story to kind of analyze what I was going through and to like put my worst impulses in. Like just as an example, like the character of Reed, who finds himself being a caretaker for his wife who's dealing with postpartum depression, and she's also very recently become a paraplegic and is experiencing depression from that, very justified depression. But he's finding himself being a caretaker for his partner who is, changed and is different, and is going through a really horrible time herself. And I was also at that moment as a caretaker for my wife, who's going through something very horrible and very very drastic, a huge change that was really upsetting her life in a number of meanings of that word. And so I got to, I was never like Reed, but I did have in some of my darkest moments thoughts that Reed has in the book. And instead of having to like, suppress that or like or lie about it to myself, I was able to just puke it out onto the page and be like, okay, well, here's what would happen if I ever gave into those impulses. And spoiler, it's not great. It's not ideal, at least we could say. And similarly, like I got to, kind of work on understanding what my wife was going through by writing the character of Anna and things like that. So like, and Mary was written while my mom was dying, and I got to put a lot of her into the book. The book that I am writing right now, that I literally just sent the next draft of to my editor this morning, is all about dads and my very complicated and strange feelings about my dad, who also died the same year my mom did, and just like, what do I think about the role of fatherhood, and how do I feel about the idea of being a father, and just, you know, all those things. The book I want to write after that is just all about like how I feel about my fucking phone and addictive behavior and stuff like that. So all of which is to say, like, yeah, there's never really a moment, for me at least, when I ever feel like I should pull back. It's always me going towards the material. To me, is part of the fun of it.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm almost repeating myself, but it's very similar to how I feel about being an actor and like acting work too. Like, you find the things that you have in common with the character, and then you get to, like, you know, pull them out of you a little bit, extrapolate them and examine them, and then hopefully you change a little bit after you write it or perform it, or whatever verb we're going with now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I even before I knew for sure that there was influence by Ira Levin's Rosemary's Baby, I absolutely love that movie. Because, you know, like there's problematic, very clearly problematic scenarios between the husband and wife. But like you can tell, I don't obviously have never spoken to the man before, Ira Levin, but you can tell that he's intelligent and he's just putting his observations down. I mean, that you can't say about every writer, but with you could tell, like with Frank, that's not we are sorry, I'm kind of throwing a lot of different things. We aren't every damn character we write, whether some people believe that or not, but like I could tell whether you've experienced or not. I don't know for sure, but there are people like that, and you can't just avoid them. So I thought that you, as a writer, you this might sound silly to say, but like you took risks that I don't think everyone would take. And I'm really glad that Tor Nightfire published his book, because I like when people kind of take a step back and you know, honor those that came before us, and you did that with Stephen King and Ira Levin amongst others. So I don't really have a question here. I just thought you did a really good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't really spoil books in this on the show, as you know, but I'm not going to, by the way.
But it ends like this.
No, I'm not going to. I should have said, but I just wanted to say how you spun a well-known monster was very well done, and that I don't think that's easy to do nowadays, because there are just so many damn books about that particular lore, and I don't know. I'm just saying a whole lot of nice things, so I don't really have a
I'll take them.
You don't have a question, but yeah, just to add on to the not a question, but the statement with the spin there.
We have no more questions.
I did really, really enjoy that. I didn't see that coming until it was there, and then I was like, that makes sense. I like where we're going with this, but then what it turned into, it all just worked, and I just thought it was great. I was like, well, this is a whole new twist I never would have thought of. So yeah, like, well done on that note. Again, another statement, not a question, with what Patrick was starting to say. The character of Frank. Well done. Because, I mean, the truth is, we write the truth, whether we call it fiction or not. It all has to have an element of truth in there, and we all know horrible, despicable people that we've all had experiences with, that have perceptions and beliefs and ideals that we don't agree with or that we don't have. And I think in order for you to write a real story, forgive the use of the word real when we're talking about fiction, but in order for you to write a story that people can relate to, you have to put real characters and real traits into the story. Everyone can't be a one-dimensional, never say a bad word, never say a slur, never say this, never. People are not like that. If the world was like that, we would all be living off of sunshine and roses, wouldn't we? Because I mean, it'd be hunky-dory.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it needs it. Any story needs those people that you just despise and you detest, and you need the people that are, expendable, and you need your heroes as much as you need your, your assholes. You need that. So he was well written, and I think he needed to be in there as every bit as much as we needed Reed in there and Anna in there and everyone else. I mean, he had a purpose whether we like it or not. We all know somebody like Frank, and I just think we would be lying to ourselves and the world if every story we wrote didn't have a believable asshole in it, because I mean, how many do we face a day?
Yeah, especially in New York City.
Right?
I've
But
known
They
many
exist.
Franks.
Sorry,
Yeah.
but those people exist. You can't write a story and ignore the fact that despicable people exist. It's just,
Yeah.
it's just life.
They
Anyway,
not only do they exist, but sometimes they hold like great power in your life.
they
Like
sure do.
Frank, the
Yeah.
character of Frank is their the character's landlord before they move into
Yeah.
the new building that kickstarts it. And like your landlord, that's a fucking touchy relationship. And
Sure
like
is.
I've had several landlords who were not good people.
Got
And
one now.
yeah,
Got one
it's
right
awful. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Don't say that too loud.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh. But yeah, like sometimes you just have to compartmentalize some of the fucking things that they say, because
Yeah.
like they actually wield a lot of power over your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm very glad and touched to hear that, because I wanted to make sure that there was somebody like Frank in here,
Yeah.
especially with this book wrestling with things like feelings of isolation and anti-Semitism and just kind of marginalization in general. That kind of voice is never at zero, but especially these days, like it feels like it's extra loud. And so there it needed to be represented in the cast of characters, as you say. So I appreciate that.
There's actually one more classic that I just thought about while you guys were talking. Robert Marasco's Burnt Offerings.
Yeah, I fucking love that book.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of that, and I like the movie too.
Yeah, that movie is wild.
Yeah, the book's better. But
it is.
The reasons why, for me, how I felt it was relatable to Nestlings is because, well, the family dynamic. The dad's just like, he's a dick, man. I mean, they're just dicks. But also, it's what you did, and Brennan brings this up. I can't say a lot, but when we do talk about making a town or an inanimate object a character, he will be the one that kind of spearheads this conversation. So now it's my turn. You do that really well with the Deptford, the apartment building. For those who haven't read it yet, it's a apartment building like an upscale apartment building in New York, Manhattan, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's fancy pantsy.
Very fancy.
And it just reminds me of that house in Burnt Offerings or in Rosemary's Baby, the entire building, where it's just like I've been to Manhattan twice, and the last time I went with my wife, and she specifically said, "Don't talk to anyone, don't be nice to anyone, because they won't be nice to you. And if someone offers you anything, look, I'm a big man child, so I'm just putting that out there. If anyone offers you anything, don't take it. She worded probably nicer than that, but I feel like this building with all the weird, even the like Iron Rock gates, the weird Halloween smile. I've never heard it phrased like that before. The weird Halloween smile that the doorman has, like that shit wouldn't phase anyone. It's New York, so I thought that was perfect. But all this to say, I really like what you did with the Deptford. I'm wondering if there is true history with a building or certain buildings in New York that you pulled events from for the Nestlings.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for all that. I love burnt offerings, and I love I love Rosemary's Baby, obviously.
Yeah,
And I mean, those are both like quintessential New York stories too.
sure.
Ironically enough, both written by playwrights as well.
Yeah.
So we all share that in common as well. But they also are very well. Rosemary's Baby less so, but definitely burnt offerings is really class conscious too, in a real way, which is very you cannot divest economic class from a New York experience. And like if you're going to tell a New York story, it's one of the things that I think Rosemary's Baby kind of drops the ball on going into. It doesn't suffer
Yeah.
for it because the book is
Yeah.
not about that, but like it's Rosemary's Baby is more concerned with Guy Woodhouse's ambitions as an actor
And
and
thioletamine,
less.
according to Chuck, which sounds right.
uh, but Burnt Offerings really goes into what it's like to have no money in New York and to just like get this opportunity for something that you really want. In this case, a vacation home, and like the desperation and also the fucking pride of just like, I'm not gonna turn this down. I've been cooped up in this awful fucking city in my tiny apartment, and I'm gonna do this thing. I'm gonna take my family to this vacation home, or in Anna and Reed's case, we're gonna take this luxury apartment that we won the lottery for. And to bridge that further into your question about the Deptford, what I did then was it was very of a theme with what we were already talking about, because I dug deep into myself for like all those things I wish my ideal New York apartment would have, because I've been living in New York for about 20 years now, a few months shy of 20 years. And so my whole adult life, I've been living in this stupid city. And you really do like collect this laundry list of things you wish an apartment had, and you never get all of them. And I've moved way more times than anybody should in the city. So like I've gone through apartment after apartment after apartment, and each one like maybe had like one thing I liked about it, and then like 15 things that were not great about it. So in some ways I was able to take, every item on that checklist and just put it into the Deptford and be like, what would be the most dangerous honeypot for me? Like if this apartment had all these things, would I ever be able to say no to it? And then I also I pulled a lot of other famous buildings, all of which exist in the world of Nestlings. So Nestlings isn't like an alternate universe where the Dakota doesn't exist, but the Deptford is kind of like the building above all of those. So I took some elements from the Dakota, some from another building called the Ansonia, which is very very similar to the Dakota. Hotel des Artistes. What are some other ones? The Beresford. And then also took the Bramford from Rosemary's Baby. So that also exists in this world, just as a little fun Easter egg.
I didn't even put that together. Nice.
Yeah, it's in universe. It's all canon. And yeah, so there were also like little bits of history from all of those buildings too that get added in. Like I'm 99% sure I'm correct on this, but now it's been just long enough since I did my research that I could be wrong. But the Ansonia, which is it's very similar to the Dakota. When you think of the Dakota, that you pretty much think of the Ansonia too. But that had a pool in the basement. Basically a bathhouse, and that was Plato's Retreat, which was a very infamous bathhouse in the 70s, where a lot of people would meet and have all kinds of sex. So it was like this hedonistic retreat for people to go to, this den of iniquity, as it were. And so the Deptford also has a pool in the basement that has since been closed down, but like was another sort of tempting thing to lure people to the building. Or the rooftop of the Deptford was also taken from some of the nicest rooftops I've ever been to, but also some of the historical famous rooftops. Forgetting which one it was. It might have been the Dakota, but I don't think so. I think it was another building, but that had like a farm on the roof where they would like grow crops and stuff like that. So like little details like that kind of get sprinkled into the Deptford as well. Because New York is just full of stories like that. In fact, one of like the biggest red flags about the Deptford that Reed and Anna both kind of ignore is that there aren't that many books written about it. Almost every other famous building in New York has just so many books written about them and like documentaries filmed at them and stuff like that. So you can actually see what it's like inside or its history of being built and stuff like that. And the Deptford doesn't, which makes it like that much more mysterious and kind of appealing and tempting.
One more question on the Deptford, then Brennan or Candace, whoever wants to jump in. Was after we talked about all this, I'm wondering if you consciously made the Deptford kind of the physical representation of, pick whatever you want, class or high, what is aesthetically like perfect, but on the inside is not. It's fallen apart, it's rotted, it's probably hollow, full of insert monsters. But I'm wondering if you went in, because you come off like the type of writer that's very conscious of that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, big time. I love that shit. Like there's a big important building in Mary too, and that was very much standing for like consciousness, like human consciousness and life. So like the crawl spaces were all very metaphorical and whatnot. And similarly in Nestlings, you kind of nailed it. It is class. It is even more than class. It is belonging. There's a running theme in Nestlings that these characters multiple times and usually in different contexts think we don't belong here. Anna has those thoughts about her wheelchair. She has those thoughts about her
about motherhood.
Body, about motherhood.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but like,
no, please.
Because I've talked about this on the show. My wife had a miscarriage. She went through we went through fertility. It was like we have good communication with each other. So that to say, I know how at least some women think during times like that, and it's fucking awful. And there's no judgment that I'm holding for that, because I will never know what that's like. But this is not the right word. I don't know what word is correct here, but it was nice to read that. Again, that sounds weird to say in this context. I don't know what, for lack of knowing what to say, but that struck me personally, like in a really, like in the core of my heart. And I'm not going to ask you to answer this question, but it feels like that comes from experience. And please don't answer if you don't want to. But like, it felt like you were bleeding on the page with a lot. And I'm not going to ask a question. I'll replace it with a comment again. But I felt like for people that haven't read this book, it's really fucking compelling. Like it's really easy to read because it's smooth, but it's really fucking hard to read at the same time. But that's the kind of shit I like. So
that's the goal. That's great to hear.
Brendan, take over, sir.
First off, I cannot let it pass that the first time you went to Manhattan with your wife, Pat, that her advice to you mirrored Santa's advice to Will Ferrell in Elf, like completely.
Well, as soon as we went in the actual city, I had like a monk grabbed my fucking wrist, put a little wristband around it, tried to give me a piece of like a book, and I didn't know what he was saying. He tried selling me shit, and my wife's tugging me away, like, get the, come on.
It's a good thing you had an adult with you.
The only person that talked to me that was a stranger was another person wearing a Boston hat, and I'm like, this makes sense. But I'm not saying everyone in Boston's nice either, but it made sense. Everyone else ignored me.
All right. Nat, I want to talk about the afterword, because both this book and Mary both have extensive afterwords. And I got to the end of the book and I loved it. And then the afterword, and I loved it even more, for you kind of opening up and just saying, here's what I was going through and here's how it impacted the writing. And I also, I loved the disability representation and how you really made it a point to make it authentic, that this is not inspiration porn. This is a real person going through hard times and having these flawed thoughts. But my question is, did you wrestle with putting either one of those afterwards in there, in the sense that I'm wondering, did you think, maybe the story should stand on its own, but also maybe I want to give the reader a glimpse into my thought process and how it impacted the story? Was that a consideration at all?
Yeah, it was for Mary. Mary was, and thank you, by the way, for those very kind words. Mary, the forward and afterward, because why do one when you could do both? That kind of came. I'd wanted to say something in Mary, but I wasn't sure what. And I love afterwards and story notes and stuff like that. Like I love the behind the curtain sort of stuff. I know it's not for everybody, but I always love to read that stuff. It also comes from my Stephen King obsession, I'm sure, because he's always been really fun at that sort of stuff. So I knew I wanted to write like something for Mary, but I don't know that I would have written a forward and an afterword quite like that had it not been for one of our beta readers, because I was very much me and my editor both really wanted to make sure that Mary passed through several sensitivity reads, because at the time I was a 39-year-old cis dude writing about perimenopause, and it was like, let's make sure I'm not showing my entire asshole to the world right now. Like, let's make sure there's
That's for the afterward.
Yeah, exactly. let's make sure I'm not being a total ignorant idiot with the things that I'm writing about, especially because Mary is written in first person present tense. It's very experiential. I wanted to make sure that I was portraying something as authentically as I could from my limited perspective. And so we had a number of sensitivity readers read it, most of whom I knew, but my editor very smartly also gave it to a couple of people who didn't know me, and so didn't have any sort of subconscious desire to see me not fail. And so they could be as brutally honest as they wanted to be. And, obviously this was like, the book was well into development by this point. It was probably the second or third draft, full draft of it. So it's not like it was like super raw. But one of those beta readers came back with some feedback that kind of changed the game, because she was like, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I almost put this book down after like 20, 30 pages or something like that, because the misogyny in it was, and the self-hatred in it was so omnipresent, and it was so tough to get through. But I didn't put it down because, I knew you. She's talking to the editor. I knew you, and I knew you wouldn't be vouching for something that you didn't believe could withstand scrutiny. So I continued to read it. And then after I got to like the midpoint where you find out essentially why that tenor is in those first pages, like there is a reason for it. It wasn't accidental or anything like that. It was very purposefully kind of put into that narrative voice. Then I loved it, and then like I saw what happened with the ending. Like I saw the whole reason for it, and I really loved it. But there probably will be a lot of people who won't give you that benefit of the doubt, she was telling us. So maybe you should put like some sort of trigger warning or some sort of content warning at the front, just to like let people know that the misogyny in this book is not an accident. It's not just the case of cis white dude writing about womanhood and just kind of thinking that this is okay. And I, for a minute, I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to, like, that feels like I'm apologizing for this book. Like I don't believe in it, or like like feel like I have to warn people about it. And then that minute quickly passed, because I was like, no, actually, let's do more than just like a content warning. Let's actually like get into it. Let's say like, here's why that shit is there. And so the forward is basically leading up to the content warning of saying like, here's why I wrote this book, and also FYI, there's going to be some stuff in here that you just got to like go with, like it's there for a purpose. And then I'll talk about it more in the afterward. And then that brings us to the afterward where like I got to like really go into like here was my thought process. Here's why I, as a dipshit 39-year-old cis white man, wanted to write about menopause in the first place. And so I was incredibly grateful for that feedback because I love that material so much. I'm very proud of that forward and afterward that originally hadn't come with the story. And then because that was such a great experience and because there was such really welcoming feedback for the forward and afterward of Mary, when it came time to write Nestlings, I was like, well, I there's no doubt, like I definitely want to talk about what was going on while I was writing this book and while I was writing Mary. So like definitely wasn't planned for Mary, but by the time Nestlings came along, like that was something I very much wanted to do and have it planned for the next book as well, because I really want to talk about my dad and dads in general and stuff like that. I don't know if I'll do it for every book because they might not all be so like heart on the page.
Well, you've made your bed now. You have to.
Yeah, exactly. Like it is kind of a thing that people expect, and I'm not mad about that. Like I really do enjoy, as you can tell by my very concise answers, I love talking about the process. I love talking about art. I love talking about like what it says about each individual's journey creating art and stuff like that. And I don't know. So the hope is that some people find it illuminating, some people find it helpful, like other artists and just people who enjoy learning about the process and stuff like that. And I think it also humanizes books too, because books are so weird. You just pull them off a shelf and you read some symbols on a page and you hallucinate somebody else's dream. It's a weird process. So like having that little bit of connection between the author and reader, I really enjoy that.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I like the behind the curtains stuff. And one of the main reasons I asked is I have a friend who wrote a book that is very personal to them, based on life experience, and considered putting in an afterword like that, and decided against it. And his reasoning, and I don't know where I would fall on this, but his reasoning was that he didn't want it to feel like review proofing. He didn't want people to feel like they couldn't be critical of the art, of the work, because they would then be critical of this life experience. And like I said, I don't know how I feel about that, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. I mean, I can stand as proof positive that not all reviewers take that into consideration. They're just as brutal as they would be without it. But yeah, no, I get that. I don't have any more coherent thought to add to that. But I guess it also just depends on, what sort of personality a writer has. Like I am someone who's very much just like blah. Like I enjoy being an open book and just talking about uncomfortably personal things. I'm fun at parties. And not everybody is, and that's totally valid. There had definitely been a moment where when I was writing the Mary material, where I was like, oh, maybe this should just be like a blog post or something like that. Maybe this shouldn't come with the book. But ultimately, yeah, I guess I'm just a bit of a narcissist enough to be like, let's put this shit in. Let's publish this too. Thank you.
Stephen King's Night Shift was the first King book that I read, and that has all the, at least the edition I read has all the behind the scenes on like what the story meant. I love that.
Me too. I used to read that stuff even more frequently than I would read the stories. Like I would read the stories a ton, but sometimes I would pick up a short story collection and just read the notes. And like that was enough for me.
I went back and forth with the anthem that I edited this year, Hot Iron, Cold Blood. I went back and forth if I should do the afterward, because like part of me was like, oh, does this come off like I'm full of myself or whatever? But I was like, it's an interesting behind the scenes story. I like reading it, and luckily the publisher was like, yep, game on. So
and then another nice thing to factor into if you're ever making this decision again too is that it's funny, we're literally having this conversation about how intrinsic to the book reading experience these afterwards are to these two books. And there are so many times when I have encountered other people who just don't read them. Like,
Yep.
And that's fine. You don't have to. You paid for the book. You can read whatever you want. But like, I'll still, to this day, I'll still get, like, if I post something on TikTok or Instagram, like a video or something like that, I'll still get comments from people who are like, "Wait, I'm just now finding out that Nat Cassidy is a man." And I'm like, well, you clearly did not read the forward and afterward where we discuss this in depth. So yeah, some people just don't read it, and that's fine too.
Do you get that in like faced in person scenarios? Like
I've gotten that a couple of times.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think some people, I mean, there is another Nat Cassidy, and she is a woman. So I think some people think that Nat is short for Natalie, which people used to joke about in middle school too, but it's not true.
Candace, you want to follow that one up?
Not that there's anything wrong with being named Natalie. I want to get that. Natalie's a lovely.
Natalie Portman is a fan of the show, so she is going to see the shit out of you. No, just
Nat on Nat violence.
Yeah, she was in Star Wars. She's important. Nat.
So lot of heavy stuff here, and we've gone over a lot of it now, which brings me to my non-heavy question of the night. Because, you said you're fond of parties, and isn't this kind of what there's more than two of us, so it's a party, right? So, fun stuff. What did you most enjoy about the Nestlings when you were writing it? I know what I enjoyed the most, but what part of it did you find the most fun as the writer, and everything that you put in here, which again, heavy, a lot of heavy stuff, but we write because we enjoy it too, and there are fun parts of this story. It's a fun, entertaining story in spite of the heaviness, because this could easily be a creepy ass movie. Like this is the creep factor is high with this one. And we've not even talked about that. Like we've talked about all the real life experiences, but this one is massively creepy. So what did you most like about all the different things that you put in here that just ramped up the whole creep factor of it and made it what it was?
Thank you. I love that question. And yeah, I agree. It is it sounds like a heavy book, but there's a lot of humor and entertainment value to it. I hope. Kind of appropriate to our earlier side conversation. The stuff about Frank was a lot of fun to write, because I again have known some Franks in my life, so getting to do certain things to those characters or to that character was very much fun. And all the stuff involving the monster not monsters, especially, I mean, I've talked about this before, so I don't need to tiptoe around it too delicately, but this book kind of takes certain elements of vampire mythology and examines them through a Jewish lens, and being a Jewish horror obsessive, like that was very delightful to do. Like I was able to say a lot of things, or not even say might be the wrong word for it, but I was able to examine a lot of things through that lens in that sort of way where, like, as a reader, I've always wanted to see that. So that was very gratifying to like get to do a thing I've always wanted to experience as a reader. That was good fun, and those characters are also just they were kind of a hoot to spend time with.
Am I here? Yeah, because I was on mute for a minute. I was like, am I here? Am I back?
I see you.
I actually really, I don't want to spoil it, but I'm gonna go with the ending and what you ultimately revealed there. Creep factor was high.
Yes.
High.
That was also fun. Yeah. I wrote that chapter in an airport
Did you?
Which just made it so weird to do.
It loved it. Just everything that you took and that you made it, and then the different little things that factored into what the ending is yeah.
Thank
Someone
you.
needs to make this a movie because I kind of want to see that in real life, but not ever, 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 ever do I want to see that in real life. But maybe on a movie screen. So
I agree. Thank you.
you're welcome.
We're in talks.
Yes, good, good. Keep me posted. Want to know.
I do want to hear from you how it felt to be a part of a discussion about Stephen King's It, to have the man listen to the conversation. And I don't know if you read Mary, but I do recall there was a plug for Mary in there. I'm wondering like how to feel, because he's clearly your biggest inspiration.
Yeah, he I mean, we could get real fucking deep if you want, because in a way he's almost like a parental figure, and especially now that like both of my parents are dead, he's one of the last remaining ones, which makes me that much thirstier for any sort of blurb. But it was incredibly entertaining and delightful when he posted about that conversation. And you know, fraught too. Like there were plenty of times where I was like, "Oh fuck, what did I say? And do I need to apologize for anything?" And I've worked with him before. Worked is maybe maybe that's too impressive sounding. I worked on a thing that he was doing. So like I was with him.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. He did a musical with John Mellencamp.
Yeah, I saw that in Boston.
Yeah. Ghost Brothers.
14 or 15, whatever.
Yeah.
No, wait. 2000. I don't. Fuck it. It doesn't matter. That was a great play, man.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I went into that not being a huge Mellencamp fan and came out of it just being a huge fan. Like, the songs in that are fucking great.
Paper and Fire, John Mellencamp. Sorry, look it up. It's a good song.
Yeah, no, I really dig him, and he's a super nice guy. And very short. But I helped out on the like one of the first workshops of that in like 2005 or 2006 in Manhattan. And I basically there's not even really a name for the role that I did in it, because one of my best friends was reading the stage directions, and he managed to just wrote me into the workshop too. And basically what I did was I just like sat in the house with King and Mellencamp, and like occasionally they'd be like, "Can you get us a coffee?" And I'd be like, "Sure thing." And I'd go get them a coffee, and then you know, I'd just be privy to talking with them or hearing their conversations and just kind of hanging out on breaks and stuff like that. He took us all out to dinner, King did, at the end, which was a fucking trip. And my main regret is that this was right before like we all had cameras on us at all times.
Yeah,
I have no photos of the two of us together or anything.
Didn't
like
happen
that.
then.
Yeah, you had to like have a camera with you, and I did not. But all of which is to say, like I've interacted with him in the past. So the podcast experience didn't have like that sort of novelty to it of like him interacting with me for the first time. But I got to see I got to see Neil, who is as big a King fan as I am, ultimately like get to actually have a full-fledged conversation with him, and a phenomenal conversation with him. It's a great interview. And I got to see him interact with Allie, our other Allie Malinyenko, who was also the other panelist on that episode, who's going through a really rough time at that time, and like his interacting with her was this huge boon as well. So it was beautiful. It was it's one of the things I've always loved about him, is that he's a very personable, it's a level of celebrity that like almost doesn't even exist anymore, because he's so zeitgeisty, and he was so the right person at the right time. Like there'll probably never be another like paperback horror boom like there was in the 70s and 80s. So to have a writer of that level of popularity, like a lot of things would have to align for that to happen. So it might never. It's one of the reasons why we'll never have like another The Beatles again.
Or
Because
Tom
the
Brady,
market,
just saying.
or Tom Brady, sure. He is a soccer player, correct?
Nailed it.
I know who Tom Brady is. I'm watching my fantasy football score
There you go.
as we converse, and it's not going well.
Oh boy.
But yeah, so like the fact that he like still gives back to the scene that made him in the community that idolizes him and stuff like that. He's a wonderful human being.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was amazing. It was lovely, and I really hope he reads one of my books. We've sent him so many copies. Come on, Steve.
I would love that, man. I'd be very happy for you.
Yeah.
Brennan, you want to bring us to the next section, sir?
Final thoughts?
Yeah.
All right, let's do final thoughts. Mr. Cassidy, final thoughts.
Well, this has been a lovely chat. I feel like we could keep going all night. Final thoughts. This has been a fucking time. Everything is really rough right now.
Yeah.
Especially on social media. And it's like I was literally finishing up the draft of my next book for most of the weekend and have already been like weaning myself off of Twitter and social media in general lately because it's just been so toxic and upsetting. But like I feel like I even just missed like some bad events or some drama or whatever you want to call it just in the past few days, and it just seems like everyone is really on edge and everyone is saying things that are very heated and feeling very passionately about things that is causing the dialogue to bounce off of itself in very I don't know, unpleasant's even the wrong word, but in ways that are really difficult for people, and all of which is to say, like, I hope everybody is taking care of themselves, and taking some time to like get offline and instead of like just posting about things or reading things that are so fucking upsetting, like going and like doing a thing that actually brings them joy or peace or addresses the issues in the world that they think need addressing, instead of just like reading these fucking feeds that just make us feel perpetually worse and worse and worse. I hope everybody, that's my final thought, is I hope everybody is taking care of themselves because we really need it. Like, these sort of situations can make it very easy to vilify each other and to forget each other's humanity. And so we gotta remember everybody else's humanity and also our own, which is, I feel like it's something I've said already, so I'm repeating myself even on other podcasts, but I feel it genuinely, and I mean it. So yeah, there's my long rambly final thought.
Well said. And I think it's important to remember that if you do need to find yourself scrolling, to remember that the people you're talking to are in fact people and should be treated as such. Patrick, final thoughts.
I know, just like Candace and Brennan, been looking forward to talking to you. Love your writing. Really appreciate the conversation. You're like a natural at this. Like, we talk to a lot of people, all great to talk to, but it's really interesting, kind of like just seeing you at what I imagine you'd be like at work. You're just really easy to bring everyone into the conversation. You're really interesting. And also, I'm surprised Brennan did not mention, I think that's a guitar and not a bass. Is that an electric guitar?
That's a bass.
Oh, damn it.
That's a guitar. Yeah, I was going to ask, is that a bass or is that a cello?
No, that's a bass.
I thought so. Bass. I fucking love an upright bass.
It's an acoustic. Sorry, not acoustic. It's an electric upright. Ooh. So that it would fit in my little Saturn when I was driving it to school every day.
That's one of my favorite instrument sounds, is an upright bass.
Yeah.
I like banjos and drums.
Banjos are great.
And harmonicas.
Drums are great. Harmonicas are great.
Yeah. Music's awesome.
Everything's great. It's all good.
Just right over there, there's a dulcimer, there's a mandolin. There's no banjo yet. I don't have a banjo, but I would like to get a banjo.
I love the way it sounds. And when you incorporate it into music that you wouldn't expect it in.
Mm-hmm.
Rock and roll in
Hell
particular, or heavy metal. It's fucking great.
Yeah.
Candace, final thoughts.
I now want to use a banjo within rap music, so I don't know what that says about me, but
That's a thing too. It's awesome.
Hell
just
yeah.
saying. Anyway, final thoughts. This has been great. Um, Looking forward to whatever you do next, and of course, having you back on because I do feel like we could have spent another hour and a half easy tonight. So this has been really great. We appreciate you and your time here as well. So thank you.
Thank you. The feeling is very much mutual. I've been looking forward to this since we set it up, which feels like it was like months ago at this point.
I don't even remember when. It was a
think it
while.
was.
It was a while, but thank you for being patient. Brennan, final thoughts.
Final thoughts are that people who are looking for good representation of banjo and rock and roll should listen to Waiting on My Deathbed by Maylene and the Sons of Disaster.
Ooh.
Fabulous electric banjo lead. Beyond that, Nat, it's been great to talk to you.
Right.
Like I said, been looking forward to it for a while. I loved Mary. I was so pleased to get my hands on an early copy of Nestlings as well. And I absolutely cannot wait to see what you've got in store. Can you give us any hints besides, you gave us kind of the overlying theme of the next one. Can you tell us anything else about it?
Yeah. I have what should I say and what shouldn't I say?
Yeah.
I will tell you this much. The comps are It meets Terminator 2 meets Twilight Zone meets Firestarter.
The fuck? Give me
it. So you already know exactly what it is just from that.
Clearly.
If Mary was my homage to like unreliable narrators and a little bit of like 80s 90s horror unpredictability and surreality and ghost story nonsense and whatnot, and also giallo and j-horror, those were also elements of Mary that I don't talk about that much, but we're very much in there. And if Nestlings was my homage to like Ira Levin and Salem's Lot and kind of 70s paranoid sort of thrillers. This next book is very much my homage to airport thrillers. Like I wanted to almost I've been very gratified by the reception that Mary and Nestlings have both gotten 100%. So when I say this is not me whinging or complaining at all. But if there have ever been complaints about Mary or Nestlings, it's been some people thinking that they're too slow burn or like they take too long to go crazy. So this next book was me like very much being like, all right, you want a fucking action pack?
Yeah.
We're getting an action pack book. So it's just set piece after set piece. It literally is borrowing a structure from Terminator 2 of just like balls to the wall, pedal to the metal. Action horror with a twist. It's still very much a book that I would write. So if you like Nestlings and you like Mary, like I'm very excited for people to read this book. But those were the thoughts going into it. I wanted it to be much more like adrenaline fueled. It's like 88,000 words. It's just streamlined, no muss, no fuss, and a massive body count.
Oh, sounds fucking fabulous, man. I'm lining up.
April 2025 it comes out because publishing
sign us
takes
up
its
for
time.
that.
That's too long. I'll need it sooner.
Sounds like you're coming back on season 6. Very good, sir.
I would be honored.
Awesome. Next episode is with Krista Carmen. We're going to talk about her upcoming book, or not upcoming, it's out now. And as always, you have many podcasts to choose from. Thank you for picking us.